The dawn of a new era begins. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1.
Good evening. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to License to Parent the Early Years. Tonight we are going to finish up last week's topic, and we're going to talk some more about using childcare. We are going to cover a lot of different topics tonight under the using childcare title, and later on we'll have shows that go into some of them in greater detail, but we're just going to give you the brief 411 on some of them tonight as far as boundaries, expectations, payments, things that you should or should not look for when looking for a child care center, just the basics. My co-host is Tori Fees. Tori is the author of Nanny D, the Daycare Whisperer blog on daycare.com, so you can go online and read her blog. And Tor, how's it going this evening?
Hey kids, going great.
Awesome. So we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. We're going to take a really short break, and then we're going to come back and get started on our topic of using childcare. See you in a few.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
Well, hi, I'm Rob Spearman. I'm a broker-owner of RE/MAX Real Estate Concepts in Des Moines, Iowa. Give us a call if you're looking at buying or selling a home, or if you're having trouble on your mortgage payments or looking to purchase foreclosures. We have the agents to help you, experienced, outstanding agents. Our office number is 515-276-2872. Or if you'd like to look at homes, go to our website, homeconnectusa.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast 1 Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com. From the RE/MAX.
Welcome back. So tonight we're talking more about using childcare. Last week we talked about the licensing requirements and registration requirements for in-home childcare. And this week we're going to talk about centers, and we're going to talk about some general expectations for both. We talked about the cost that goes into childcare and all of the bills that get paid every month so that you would have an understanding of items that you might not think of that are included in what childcare costs. And so right now I have a short list that we're going to start going over of questions that parents ask all of the time. And we're going to try to answer them from both sides of the fence so that you can understand where we're coming from as a child care center or in-home. And we are going to also look at the parent side of it because we are parents, and I as a parent have used child care prior to owning child cares. So if you feel like we have not been representative of your opinion, please make sure to email us or to text us with a message. If you go to www.parentpermit.com, that is my website and blog, and you can go online and post comments. You can send me emails, and we definitely want to know what you think from the parent side of the fence. This is not a true discussion unless we all get to participate, so feel free to send us some stuff. Okay, so recently at my centers, I had something happen that was not in my control. However, it caused my centers to have to shut down for a temporary period of time. And there have been 2 occurrences since opening these centers where they have had to close. And the first was due to broken air conditioners when the heat was so incredibly bad. The second was due to a child coming in that we later found out was positive for whooping cough. Now, with the air conditioning, it was during the days where the heat index was 115, 120. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. If you cannot cool the building, then you have to go ahead and shut it down. In my case, my buildings are leased, and so the air conditioner units that broke are owned by the building owner, and they made arrangements for someone to come out and fix them. However, because parts had to be ordered, it did cause us to close down for 2 days. I am currently issuing a credit for those 2 days to parents. That was my choice. It is not something that I'm required to do, but it is something that I felt like was fair because they had to find other childcare at the last minute. The second closure was due to whooping cough, which was due to a daycare parent who chose, for religious reasons or personal reasons, not to immunize her school-age child. And this child contracted whooping cough, came into my center with an active case, and exposed a large number of children. Now, because whooping cough is so serious, I then made the executive decision that all of the children with direct contact had to be treated. With the children with direct contact having a lot of younger siblings and having parents who worked in my center, it quickly became obvious to me that the only safe way to do it was to shut the center down for 72 hours, have everyone get treated, make sure that everything was safe and everything was clean before the families came back. Had it been chickenpox or the flu or hand, foot, and mouth, which we also had hit our center this season, I would have made a different decision and not close the center down. But because whooping cough is potentially fatal to infants and toddlers, I felt that to take the safest course of action was to immediately treat and separate all of the children so that no one got sick. And we have not seen any further cases at our center on 86th Street. It stopped at the one case, which I am forever grateful. And I'm knocking on wood now because we only have about 3 more days. If we don't see another case within the 3 days, then we will know that not a single child contracted the illness from the child who had it, which is amazing. So I decided also to issue credits for those days, and we'll be issuing those to the families. Once again, not something that was required, but it was something that I felt about doing, that I felt like I should do to help with the cost of finding other childcare and having their children treated. So centers and in-homes are different when it comes to daycare credits, but I do want to talk about when you should and should not expect a credit for childcare. In the case of a center, if your center is closed for a holiday, if your center is closed for an annually scheduled repairs day where they shut down once or twice a year to do repairs to the building, to paint, to do staff training, to me it is acceptable that those days are the same rates as any other weeks in care. So even though you may have, for example, Labor Day is next week, we are closed for Labor Day. However, the weekly rate for the Labor Day week does not change, because all of our staff are also paid for Labor Day. And so it's the same rate regardless, because it is a paid holiday, as most of our parents get paid for the holiday. Tori, what is your policy on credits? When do you issue them and when do you not issue credits?
I have actually never issued a credit.
For anything?
No.
Okay.
But I haven't missed a day of work in 17 years. I've only missed 1 day of work, and that was my first year of doing in-home daycare. So I have never had to issue any kind of credit. I get paid for the major holidays: New Year's, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and Christmas. So those are 8 days. And then I have a week of paid vacation in June and a week of paid vacation between Christmas and New Year's. So I pretty much shut down the last 2 weeks of December and then 1 week in the early summer. And so I get paid for all of those days. Those are built into my fees. And the only time I would ever issue a credit is if I canceled daycare because I was sick. And because I have a staff assistant, I'd pretty much have to be on, contagious or on death's door knocking before I'd close down. So if it's an inclement weather day, then I used to have the policy that if you can get to my house, I will be open that day. And a year ago, I had actually had someone fall on my front sidewalk. And so for this year and for the future of my daycare, anytime that the courthouse is closed, the federal government is closed, I'm going to close down, and it will be with pay. It's just not safe to have the kids on the property, and you're always going to have at least, one daycare parent who, no matter how dangerous the roads are, even if they have the day off, they're going to want to bring their kid to daycare. And that's what actually happened to me. I had a parent that was off of work. The other parent was off of work. And all of the kids had canceled that day. And one parent decided that they were going to come. And I tried to keep the sidewalk clean. It was icing, rain ice. There's nothing I could do about it. And the parent fell. Thank goodness wasn't holding the kid, and nothing happened. Nothing bad happened from it. But it really opened my eyes that it isn't even an issue of can they get to my house. The issue is, can they be on my property safely, even if it's only a 15-foot walk. And so I just have made the decision, not when the Des Moines Public Schools is closed, because they have different reasons for closing than I would. But if the courthouse closes, the post office, the federal government, Wells Fargo, if Wells Fargo closes, he's bad outside.
Yeah, if Wells Fargo closes,
I
the
pretty
world is
much
coming
follow
to an
Wells
end.
Fargo.
We love Wells Fargo.
Yeah, we do. So that's how I'm going to do it in the future. And I would not issue a credit for those days, because it would be just an act of God. I have had to close a couple of times because we lost our power. And the way that I do that is if the power goes off within 1 hour, I notify the daycare parents that the power's out, and I basically give it another half an hour or so. If the power doesn't come back on, then everybody has to come and get their kid, and I don't issue a credit.
We have a little bit different policy than you do as far as closing. When I was in home, I had the same policy as you did for quite a while, and you and I have had this conversation. I used to tell parents, if you can get to my house, you can drop your child off. And just like Tori, what I found was that there were always going to be parents that, even though the roads were completely unsafe for their children, even if their employers closed down, even if they were told you don't have to show up to work, would still bring their children to me and then think, well, I'm already paying for it, so I might as well use it. Yep. And it became a personal issue for me of, I felt like I was encouraging them to take their children out on roads that were completely dangerous. And then what happens if the weather gets even worse and you can't pick your children back up? Because my big worry is you might be able to drop off to me in the morning when the first couple of inches have fallen, when another 1.5 feet has fallen and the roads are closed between your house and mine because you live in Ankeny. Then what happens when you can't come pick your child up?
Right.
Because I obviously am, ready, willing, and able to do daycare during daycare hours. However, keeping a child overnight that's never stayed at my house, having a child who it's getting dark outside is very anxious. Where's my mommy? Where's my mommy? And having to explain to that child, well, your mom can't get here because of the roads. That is not a pressure that I want. And also the liability, because no matter how many times you shovel, no matter how much you scrape, no matter how much you salt, in Iowa, when that icy rain is coming down, there's no way to stay ahead of it and make it 100% safe. And so, yes, one bad accident, one parent falling, holding an infant,
you're done.
And as an in-home provider, no one will give you insurance.
Right,
you're uninsurable instantly. So that is a very large issue.
Well, you have to think of it too, and a couple of things. One is, even if there's no other kids in the house, I've had that happen before too, where every single kid canceled but one, and then you have, you're basically staying open to have one kid in the house, no playmates and all that. And the parent can look at it from the point of view of, yay, my kid gets 1-to-1 all day long. So that's actually an encouragement for them to come. But I've also had situations where everybody canceled, one parent didn't, and then that parent actually got stuck and got, stuck not being able to get to my house on the way to my house. So I've thought a lot about what you said to me a few years back of, if you're open, you're also encouraging encouraging them to bring their kid out on the road.
Yep.
I used to look at it that it's their adults, they make the decision. They have to pay for the day anyway. And I really didn't think of it in terms of what am I encouraging, and I didn't think of it of that, I might not be able to keep my property safe no matter how hard I try.
Yes.
The second thing too is if you're open and you get one kid in the house in home daycare and you are there, you can't go outside and clean the sidewalk and do the driveway. All it takes is one daycare kid to arrive, and then you physically can't go outside to
Yes.
treat the property. So you have to think about it in terms of that it's illegal to leave the kids in the house by themselves. It's too bad of weather to take the kid out with you. How are you going to take care of salting or scraping? So it's a tough one because you're basically saying to the parents, you have to pay for this day, but you can't come.
Yes.
And we're not in the business of cheating people.
No.
The parents just have to understand that there's going to be a few days a year when something weather-wise is going to happen. That's built into the fees. And if I were the center owner, if I was in your position, if I owned a center, I would have at least 5 inclement weather emergency days that the parents would agree to when they signed on. I mean, if I were you, that's what I would do from the very beginning, that they understand in a calendar year from January to January that you have the potential to shut down for 5 days without loss of pay so that you can have some built-in cushion for if you get exposed to whooping cough, which is of nothing that you did wrong. It just happened to the business. Or if you have, a property issue of flooding or the air conditioning or the power severed, the plumbing doesn't work. We've had that, happen before. You've got to have something built into your fees that you are able to shut down and not take that big hit because you're still paying for everything, whether the kids are in the building or not, except for staff.
And the one thing we do have with our center is that we do not issue credits for inclement weather days. Mm-hmm. So the parents already know that. It's in their handbook that if the school district where the center is, so my West Des Moines Center goes by the West Des Moines School District. My Urbandale Center goes by the Urbandale School District. If the school district closes for weather, there is no credit issued. And the reason we close for weather, there's a couple of reasons, but the largest one is that when you have a child care center, you have staff who have to drive to work. Those
With their
staff
kids.
also have children,
Yep.
and some of their children are in school. So then you have staff who have school agers who can't go to school. Where do they take those school agers? Because your license only has a certain capacity.
Right.
At 86th Street, I am licensed for 193 children. If I have staff coming in with their school agers and I don't have a school age classroom to put them in, then I have a licensing violation. If I have more kids coming in than I do staff because they can't make it on the roads, then I have a licensing violation. So the other part of the equation is, am I trying to force my staff to go out on dangerous roads with their children so that parents who choose to go out on dangerous roads can do so? Or do I say, look, I understand your need to drop your children off. However, I have to look out for the best interest of everybody. And it is in everyone's health and welfare best interest that when the Department of Public Safety says you should not be traveling, that I don't ask my staff to travel. Right. And my bottom line is that I have to ensure not just the children who come to me for safety, but I also have to ensure my staff and their children's safety because they show up every day working hard for me. I don't want to put them out on dangerous roads with their children.
And what you have in a center, too, is you have a deal where the staff is much more likely to call in and say that they can't come that day than the parents are.
Yes.
And so you're going to have a disproportionate
Yep.
number of kids there with, even if the parents are not even working that day, you still have a pretty high likelihood that you're going to have a good number of kids come in, and the staff are going to be way more likely to not want to get in the car and come, whether they have school-age kids, their own little kids that they have to transport. A staff assistant is more likely to call in on a weather day than a parent is. Well, we got to have the staff there for the kids, no matter what. So you have to take the position of that I really do have to think about everybody. And that happens in home daycare and center. There's times when we have to make a group decision and it's not welcomed by the parents.
Yes.
And I learned my lesson when I had a parent fall, even after very laborious work to keep the driveway clean. It's still with my best effort, and I am crazy fastidious about it. I still couldn't do it. I literally could not keep up with the driveway. I couldn't keep up with the sidewalk, and I allowed them to come onto my property, and if anything would have happened, it may have been the end of my business.
Yes.
If there would have been, an injury where there was surgery required or emergency vehicles, that's the other thing. What is your potential to be able to get an emergency vehicle to your house?
Yes.
And that's something that when you have a large number of kids at a center, you also have to think, okay, I've got these kids in the center. What if something actually happens today? Will I be able to get the police here? Will I be able to get the ambulance here? It's that parents have to understand that the decision isn't made about their one kid, that we have group decisions to make. And sometimes you have to pay a fee for that day because you're paying for that right decision to be made that day.
Exactly.
That's what your $40 a day is for.
And
is
nobody
that one
can pay
decision.
us to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, you cannot.
Another one of those.
Yeah,
Can't
that's-
give us permission to do the wrong thing.
can't.
We talk about that all the time.
Right.
So we're going to be back in just a couple of minutes. We're going to take a few minutes of break here, and then we're going to go on to some other topics that come up about using childcare. Next, we're going to talk about medication policies.
Oh, boy.
What should we give your kids, and when
No
should we
medicine.
allow them in? Yes,
None.
we'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
Get away from us, you needle credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit, you're our hero!
Well, hi, I'm Rob Spearman. I'm a broker owner of RE/MAX Real Estate Concepts in Des Moines, Iowa. Give us a call if you're looking at buying or selling a home, or if you're having trouble on your mortgage payments or looking to purchase foreclosures. We have the agents to help you, experienced, outstanding agents. Our office number is 515-276-2872. Or if you'd like to look at homes, go to our website, homeconnectusa.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast 1 Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
Welcome back. Happy Tuesday. So we are talking about using childcare, and the next thing we're going to talk about on the list is medical policies. Now, this one is a huge one for centers and in-homes alike. Both centers and in-homes have medication policies, and if your center or in-home does not have a medication policy in writing, don't hire them. Do not hire them. You need to see what the circumstances are where your child will be excluded. You need to see what medications your child care will or will not give. You need to see under what circumstances you will get a phone call. And the discussion needs to be had up front about things that you disagree with. So before you sign the parent handbook, and I tell every parent this, read this carefully. It is a legal document. Before you sign the parent handbook, that you agree to the medical policies. If there are any medical policies that you don't understand, then you have to make sure that you ask the questions. So first we're going to talk with Tori about in-home policies. What's your medication policy?
You know, I really don't give medicine anymore. It used to be more of an issue back in the day when antibiotics were 4 times a day. Then it changed to commonly 3 times a day. Once it hit to 2 times a day, then parents could give it before daycare and after daycare. So I made a decision that I'm going to try to, my goal is all year long, every year, year after year, not give a single dose of medicine. And I've been, the one thing that I had to really put the hammer down on was nebulizer treatments. There has been a lot of the cough medicine's been taken off the market now. It used to be you could go down to Walmart and there would be a huge row of all different kinds of cough suppressants and nasal decongestants for kids. Those aren't available anymore. So when kids have colds or respiratory issues, the doctors are prescribing nebulizer treatments, and they are 20-minute deal. They're a lot of parent contact. It takes a lot of time to give one. I'm a registered nurse, so I have to do assessment and documentation about lung sounds with every dose. So it's a pretty big deal to have a kid have a nebulizer treatment at my house. So I made a decision that I was just, if a child needed to have a nebulizer in my, 3 times a day or whatever, 1 time a day, that I just wouldn't have the kid that day, that I wasn't going to accept children that needed to have that treatment. And so unless the kid qualifies under the Disability Act. If the child qualifies under the Disability Act, then of course I will give the medication that I need to for them to be able to access my services. But if it's just a kid that doesn't have any chronic illness diagnosis, doesn't qualify under the Disability Act, I don't do neb treatments in my house. So now I don't really give anything. I don't give Tylenol or Advil. I would give Tylenol or Advil if I had a child with a history of febrile seizures. That would be one exception to the rule, but I don't give it for teething, or I don't give allergy medicine, or I just don't give any medicines. I've been able to work it out with my small group that I can't even tell you the last time I gave a medicine. I don't remember it.
Yeah.
How does that work with you?
Centers are a little bit different, but we, as a center, my center actually has a far more stringent medical policy than most. So, first of all, it is important for parents to understand that as a center, we have a liability insurance policy. And one of the huge risks that centers take is that every time someone administers medication to your child on the center premises, then the center is responsible and has some liability if there is a reaction, if there is an overdose, if there's an inappropriate use. And so I have to weigh, when looking at medications, the importance of the medication versus the liability that's being given to us by having to administer.
Right.
So here's what I tell parents, and this is a rule that I feel it's fair to expect them to adhere to. If your child has a medication that is a 1-time-a-day medication, my center should never be administering that medication.
Nope.
Whether
just
you
to tell you about it.
Yep.
You should know about it,
Yes.
but you shouldn't be given it.
Yep. We should be informed of every medication that your child takes. But if it's a once-a-day medication, you can administer it at home. If it is a twice-a-day medication, you're talking every 12 hours.
Give it at home.
I am open 12 hours. I'm open 13 from 5:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night. I do not have a lot of parents whose child is there the entire 13 hours.
Right.
So obviously,
way.
you can administer that medication before the child comes and when they get picked up. Now, a lot of parents will tell me, well, it has to be done with food. And I understand that some medications
feed
have
'em.
to be done with food, but you
Feed
can
'em.
give your child a granola bar. You can give them a piece of toast. You can give them a small glass of milk. Take with food does not mean take with a huge 5-part meal. Take with food means put a small amount of food into your stomach to kind of absorb some of the effects of the medication irritating your stomach. And so because your doctor says take with food, that doesn't mean that that has to be taken with breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You can feed your child a small glass of milk or a small snack and still get their medication taken. It is unfair to expect a center to give medications simply because you don't want to deal with the hassle. If your child is one of those children who spits medication back, who screams, who squirms, who is uncomfortable, it's still your parental responsibility to
Right.
take care of that medication. You are the one who is responsible for being the bad guy. It is not right to put the bad guy persona on your child's teacher and then have them not wanting to come into childcare every day because their teacher had to hold them down to administer eye drops or to put medication down their throat that they don't want to take. It's also very difficult to watch other children while holding a struggling child down to administer medication. It's also very difficult to hold a child who's struggling and not injure them in some way. And so you're also increasing the liability that your child might get hurt or bruised on accident. And then we have the responsibility of calling in a child abuse report, and that staff member then becomes responsible for something that never should have happened in the first place if you had given your child the medication at home. 3 time-a-day medications, I will administer 1 dose. 1 dose, that's it. And they have to be a medication that is necessary for illness or injury. And so just because you bring my son a doctor's note that says your child needs to have Tylenol every 4 hours, I will not administer Tylenol every 4 hours for teething. I will not administer Tylenol every 4 hours for shots because your child got shots yesterday. I will administer Tylenol if your child spikes a fever of 100 and 304 and I call you and you're not going to be here within the next 10 minutes. Then absolutely, if it is necessary for illness or injury, I will administer a pain or fever reducing medication. However, I don't allow my staff to make that decision. I don't allow teachers in the classrooms to decide when a child needs Tylenol. And I don't administer Tylenol for anything that is not illness or injury. So shots, not illness or injury. Teething, not illness or injury. Fussiness, not illness or injury.
Right.
Only
The other
in
thing
chronic,
too about
in cases of actual
in the center, you guys have to have the staff be trained for medication administration. So often the person who's trained for that and can do it in a center isn't someone that has daily contact with your kid. I mean, if you do, unless you train your entire staff, which would be pretty expensive to do.
Right.
So you have a select group of people in the center, the center director, the assistant director, the on-site supervisor. So you don't want to put someone who's not dealing with your kid every day in the position of giving your kid a med that they definitely don't want. So, I mean, that's part of the process, too. In a center, you don't want to put that onto a group of people when you can take care of that at home.
Right.
Do you know what the Des Moines Public Schools does, though?
Huh.
They, 3 time-a-day meds, they do before school, after school, and bedtime. The Des Moines
Which you
Public
can
Schools
do
tells you
every
that
8
you
hours.
don't, if it's 4 times a day, you can get the Des Moines Public Schools to be a part of it. But when I was a school nurse at Moulton Elementary back in the day from 90 to 93, in that building, out of 450 kids, I had 40 kids, 40 kids coming down to my office every day because then in those days, the special needs or special ed kids were in self-contained classrooms. So we had, I think, 3 classrooms with special ed kids. They were on Ritalin, Salerta or whatever the ADD medicines, and then I had the kids who live in a poorer environment have a lot more respiratory problems. You see a lot higher asthma rate when you're dealing with kids that are in poverty. So I had asthma medication, the behavioral medication. I was doing like 40 of them a day because they would be specifically ordered at noon with lunch. And that is one of the kind of the tricks that we've seen come our way at the center is if the parent doesn't want to give the medicine, they'll ask the doctor to write an actual time down on the medication, on the prescription, and then basically force your hand into having to give that medication at 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning. That's the time when I have to come into the situation. I get called to deal with the doctor's office or to deal with the parent, to work with the doctor's office to say, look, this is a medication that can be given at home. We don't want to involve the daycare center with it. And it basically means telling the doctor and communicating with the doctor that, this is not a necessary thing to put onto group care. And sometimes the doctors are, once they understand that the kid's going into a group, then they, and that it is a big deal for a center to give a medication, they often then re-counsel the parent and say, look, you can't do this at home.
And here are some things that you parents at home need to understand about medication administration in centers. 1 nebulizer treatment is a $30 cost to the center.
Yes.
Now, we have a lot of parents who their child will have a respiratory illness. The doctor will give them a nebulizer and a box of
48,
96,
48 or 96.
150 sticks, whatever.
Of the medicine. That's little
The one thing
jets.
that your physician needs to tell you that they don't is that, first of all, it is only to be used for what it's prescribed for as long as it's prescribed for. So if your doctor gives you a prescription for 3 days of nebulizer treatments and tells you after 3 days that your child can come off the nebulizer, those sticks are not to be used for the very next cold that comes along. They are not to be used for every child in your household for every little bit of sniffles. It is against the law to use a prescription for something other than what it was prescribed for. And we're talking the actual illness that it was prescribed for. So if it's prescribed once for a chest cold, you do not get to decide that 6 months later it's appropriate for the next chest cold or the next chest cold. And you do not have the right to bring us a medication that was not prescribed for that illness and expect for us to give it to your child. You're breaking the law. You're asking us to break the law. And it should not happen. Now, there are a lot of centers that with a parent's permission and medical authorization will administer any kind of medication that parent hands over. But the law says, and the licensing requirements say, original container, only for the illness it was described for, current prescription, not 6 months, 12 months old, only for the child it was prescribed for. And all of those things have to be clearly marked along with clear instructions for when, why, and how. And we're going to talk about all of that in just a few minutes when we come back. Be back in a few.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast 1 Live.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
Well, hi, I'm Rob Spearman. I'm a broker-owner of RE/MAX Real Estate Concepts in Des Moines, Iowa. Give us a call if you're looking at buying or selling a home, or if you're having trouble on your mortgage payments or looking to purchase foreclosures. We have the agents to help you, experienced, outstanding agents. Our office number is 515-276-2872. Or if you'd like to look at homes, go to our website, homeconnectusa.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast 1 Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
Welcome back. So we're talking about medication policies with centers and in-homes and what you can expect and what you should and should not be willing to do. We have just begun talking about prescriptions. And so the next on the list, of course, are prescriptions for things that are non-traditional. Homeopathics is something that we discuss. And here's the bottom line with that. Centers, insurance companies will not cover the liability of any medication that is not FDA approved. So even if we wanted to be able to give your child teething tabs and a cream from the acupuncturist, it cannot be done. We can't give your child an herbal tea from the Eastern medicine guy. Our insurance will not cover any kind of bad reaction, and we have to be very careful about it. And back to the issue of nebulizers, the other big thing that we find with nebulizers with parents is that you have to understand that nebulizer sticks, because of the extremely low cost of making them in bulk, they don't come in small prescription packages. So it's not possible for your physician to prescribe 12 sticks, which is 3 days worth. So literally what they do is they give you a prescription for 30 days worth when you only need 3 days worth, because the pharmaceutical companies don't make a 3-day package. That does not mean that you can keep those sticks and use all 40 or 90 or 100 simply because they were written for your child. If the doctor tells you that it's a 3-day dose, then after 3 days your child is doing better, the rest of the sticks should be discarded. The only exception to this rule is children with chronic asthma who have a nebulizer prescribed for their asthma attacks and symptoms. And then you need to talk to your pediatrician about making sure that if it is necessary to do it on an as needed basis or on a regular interval basis. And albuterol, which is the most common medication used in nebulizers, is a serious business medication.
Yes, it
For those of
is.
you who think that those little sticks are like salt water and you can put 2 or 3 in there, if your child's breathing heavy, you can do a double or a triple treatment and it won't hurt them. It's no big deal. Or anytime they get the start of a cold, you can have the nebulizer and open them right up. No big deal. I'm going to let Tori talk about albuterol and some of the potential things that can go wrong and some of the potential side effects. Tor, tell us your story.
Well, the thing with the albuterol is the side effects is that it can cause a rapid heartbeat. It can cause death if it's administered incorrectly. I had a deal when my son was little where we went to the emergency room. He had the reactive airway disease when he was a baby, and we went to the emergency room. I think it was about 18 months. And they have the ability to do very fast administrations of it and do them back to back because they have the rescue medicines on site and they have a physician on site. So if a kid's really in distress, they can give way more than we're able to give. We're able to give just a single dose at a time. And there was a little boy in the next area over from us that actually went into cardiac arrest while he was being given one dose after another. He went into tachycardia, very bad. It was really scary. So I got to see kind of firsthand what can happen in that controlled setting. Of course, they got him, back into shape. He was fine in the end. But it was a really scary deal to realize how super powerful that medicine is. And it made me have a lot of respect for it because a lot of people that are giving it don't, really look at it that it has these potential side effects that can actually be life-threatening. And in a center in a home daycare, we don't have rescue medicines. We don't have the ability to have a 911 appear in 10 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes. So we have to take these drugs seriously because they're very serious meds. One thing, too, that happens with nebulizers that I think is worth bringing up is that because they're so time-consuming, very often parents will come in the door at 8 o'clock in the morning and tell you that the last dose that the kid had was at 4 a.m. and they can only have them every 4 hours. So the parent will set up the first dose to happen right after the kid gets to your house. So you could end up giving one at 8 a.m., another one at noon, and another one at 4. So you could end up with as many as 3 doses, 3 different times a day. And they take like 20 minutes.
$30 a pop.
Yeah, they're expensive.
That's $90 a day for one child multiplied by 20, 30 children.
Yeah, and we've
You
actually
do the
had that
math,
happen.
And you guys wonder why the cost of childcare keeps going up. It's because the expectation is there that we will do things that are extremely expensive and that there will be no added increase in cost to the parents. And the reality is we have to pay a staff member to do those nebulizer
Right.
treatments at 30 minutes apiece. We have to pay a staff member to clean up the equipment afterwards. We
Yes.
have to pay a staff member to document and to chart.
Yep.
And so every little bit of that goes into the cost. And at $30 a nebulizer treatment, that means if you have 10 children who get one treatment a day, that's $300 a day in cost to the center.
Yep.
That is $1,500 a week in cost to the center. That is over $6,000 a year in costs to the center.
Well, I had a situation, I think it was in 2008, when they took the cough medicines off of the market. And so it was very common that the kids would get the nebulizers as a treatment for colds. And I think I had about 11 kids. I had a staff assistant that had been with me for years. And we ended up with this perfect storm where we had, I think it was 9 of the 11 kids actually had nebulizer machines at home. They had prescriptions for them. At that time, I didn't have limits to it. I had the deal where the parents came in and said that the last treatment the kid had was in the middle of the night, but it was due 15 minutes from now or a half an hour from now. And in one day, just with the capacity of 11 kids, we gave 20 neb treatments in one day. And that day, I had no choice but to do it. They were ordered. We had the kids that are sick enough to need them. They're like a gateway into bringing a sick kid to daycare. You're not giving them for fun. They actually have respiratory issues. And so we ended up doing 20 in one day. And I basically ended up paying a staff assistant the entire day to deal with respiratory therapy treatments. And that was the day I said, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. If it's an acute illness, the kids do not qualify under the Disability Act, meaning I have to do it, then I'm just going to stop doing it. So I gave a message to the parents that if the kids were acutely ill enough to the point where they needed respiratory therapy treatments, that they just couldn't come to daycare that day. And it took that year's cycle of the cold season to go by, but I haven't had a problem with it since. So the parents understand that if the child is sick enough that they need to have nebulizer treatments, that they're just going to have to stay home that day. Yeah. And I'm actually seeing less of it being prescribed to. I don't know if you are or not, but in my small population, I think I've only got 2 kids that have them now out of 8 kids.
And for us, it's pretty much become a non-issue now because we've just made it very, very clear to our parents that these are the guidelines and this is the way it's going to be. And so...
And you have a fee attached to it, too, and that really helps solve things.
We just
if you
recently
put a fee on it and say, we'll do it, but it is actually $30 in administration, then that covers your staff time, my time of any consulting that you need to do with me, and that's a reasonable amount. And as soon as you attach a fee to it, the parents just quit asking for it. I mean, or you have them go to their doctors to try to get the kind of diagnosis that would qualify them under the Disability Act. That's actually happened to me before in my daycare, where I've had a kid go to a doctor and the parents really pushed hard to get a specific diagnosis to be able to have the treatments be at no cost to them.
And here's another one that comes up. Okay, you guys, speaking of that, Tori and I just went through last year in the cold season. Don't know if you remember this particular parent or not. Tell me if you remember.
I'm sure I do.
We had a little one who mom felt that he needed a nebulizer. Every few hours, every day, no exception, she wanted him to have it.
Well, it was more than one med, too, and they couldn't be put together.
Yes. And the prescription
that happens all the time.
As needed. PRN means per necessary, which means as needed. Now, parents, here's the guideline. If you're going to leave your children with us, with Tori and I to watch, then we decide when the medication is needed. We're there in the room with your child. We're seeing them. We're seeing their symptoms. You are at work, away. When we feel that medication is necessary, we will administer it. Now, when a medication says as needed, just because you, the parent, want it done every 4 hours no matter what, doesn't make it needed. And we get to make that decision. If you don't trust us to make that decision, do not bring us your child. Don't bring us your child. If you don't feel that I am qualified to decide when your child is having an asthma attack, don't bring me your child. But the bottom line was this parent wanted it done every 4 hours, and she was insistent. And I refused. And she then decided that she would call up on the phone every day, every few hours, and tell me that her child needed it. And I was right there with her child. And I said, no, he doesn't need it. He's running around. He's playing just fine. Then she went to her doctor and pressed and pressed and pressed and got her doctor to give her a diagnosis of asthma so that her child would qualify for the Americans with Disabilities Act, so that she would be able to insist that her child had to have nebulizer treatments, and whether they were necessary or not, I would be forced to administer. We terminated care. Not because her child was then covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, but because, in my opinion, her child did not need the medication and was being given a medication that he did not need, and I was not about to enable. Yeah. And so there's a fine line when you come to us with medications and say, only, my child only has to have this if they need it. You have to understand that we have to be the ones to decide when they need it.
Well, and part of that process, too, was us communicating with the physician saying, look, you're getting the parental history on this, that in order to make this diagnosis, the kid was too young to be able to have really any official testing to be able to prove it. And it wasn't an asthma diagnosis. It was actually reactive airway disease, if I remember. The first one was reactive airway disease. And then we said that still is an acute illness. And then she took it further and got an asthma diagnosis. But when we ended up working directly with the physician's office and us communicating directly with the doctors saying, we're actually really watching this kid. I'm watching him on the camera. The staff is watching him in the rooms. We're not seeing any signs at all that he's having any problems. Yep. So when the parent is coming to you saying that this kid is having all of these episodes, we can tell you that Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. until 4:30 p.m., we're really not seeing this. He's able to play on the equipment. He doesn't have any shortness of breath. Nothing that we are saying that he needs it as necessary. So when the physician knew that we were, saying we're actually not seeing this, then the physician was more willing to work with us. Yep. And so sometimes it takes the communication with the doctors too. You get a small percentage of parents that have the need for their child to be sick or to garner a lot of attention. It's not a super common thing, but it does happen in a population of 200 kids. And so sometimes it's our responsibility to just, say, I can't be a part of this. You and the doctor have made this decision that the kid has this diagnosis. I don't see this. It's actually requiring me to act, to do something, and I just can't be a part of it. There's a time when we as providers have to just walk away and say, look, I just can't do this. I don't feel that it's ethically right. It's healthy for this kid to be given all of this medicine when we're not seeing any symptoms. And it was just better for us to just say, find a different arrangement for them because we can't be a part of it.
And so here's another part of the medical equation. If you are going to ask us to take medical responsibility for treatments for your child, then you have to be willing to authorize us to speak to the doctor or the nurse.
Yes.
There are so many times that our center has needed to ask a question of a doctor or a nurse, and because we don't have a signed release from the parent, we cannot get that question answered, which leaves us calling a doctor or a nurse who does not normally see your child. So if you're going to want us to administer any medication, it does not matter what kind, be willing to sign a release, and you should also expect that if you want us to take medical responsibility, that we have a right to talk to the doctor about our concerns as well.
Right.
So if we're concerned that your child is taking a medicine that is not appropriate, not making them act right, it's causing a side effect, we, as the provider, the primary caretaker, should have the right and a release signed by you so that we can call your doctor and ask those questions. Because obviously, you don't want a bad reaction for your child any more than we do. And so there needs to be complete and total honesty. You need to tell your doctor the whole story. We need to be able to talk to them about our concerns. There needs to be complete openness about what's going on. And if you're using a physician to cheat the system, then by us saying you cannot have us do this unless you bring us this, then that takes the cheat out of the system. And that is one of the reasons that our center, in addition to several other centers, are now stating that a doctor's note to return to childcare is no longer enough, because a lot of physicians will write a note to return to childcare knowing the child is contagious, knowing that the child is going to be in with other children who may have a compromised immune system, who may be premature, who may have other illnesses or conditions that can be exacerbated by catching the illness that this child has. And so a lot more centers now, including ours, are requiring that an actual diagnosis be on the doctor's note, and that the note say, this child is no longer contagious to other children. And don't be offended if your center asks you for that, because you don't want another parent bringing a contagious child in to cough on your child. And if you are demanding that your child have a safe and healthy environment, then you are taking on the responsibility of making sure that your child doesn't contribute to a non-safe or non-healthy environment. Therefore, medicating your child and bringing them to daycare when you know they have a fever, bringing your child to daycare when you know they vomited the night before, bringing your child to daycare when you know that they are not feeling well and they are glassy-eyed and they are listless and they are not doing well for the sake of going to a meeting at work, means that you are literally doing to all the other children in your child's classroom what you would not want someone else to do to your child. And you have to take responsibility for all of the children that your child can expose to an illness.
The Tylenol thing and the Advil is the biggest, contending thing, really, besides the NEB treatments, because we're finding that parents are getting notes from the doctor saying that the child can have Tylenol or Advil every 4 hours or every 6 hours for teething. And the problem with Tylenol and Advil is that it's also a fever reducer.
Yep.
So we've had issues with parents getting doctor's notes for teething, and it's actually being given to hide or mask a fever. So that is a really big, tell to us. If we have a kid who is not having any teething issues at all, I've never in my whole career ever given Tylenol or Advil for teething. We manage teething without having to give any kind of medication. So when you have a parent that's insisting on the Tylenol every 4 hours or the Advil every 6 hours, it makes us really suspicious when we're not seeing any teething issues, that the reason that you want us to give it to them is to make sure that the fever doesn't go up in the afternoon or doesn't go up right before nap or after nap. And we've had that pulled on us a lot.
Amen.
Way too much. So, and because of this being done to us, we kind of pretty much have to say no Tylenol, no Advil on our clock. We're not giving it.
Yep.
And we don't use it. Do you ever give Tylenol or Advil for teething? I mean,
No.
from you saying that you want to give it?
I do
you ever
not
that?
administer Tylenol. I do not administer Motrin. I do not administer teething gel. I do not administer medication for teething. Teething is a natural growth process. It is not an illness. It is not an injury. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you that I just recently, one of my staff, her child has been teething, and he got a bumpy gum from teething. And had she given him fever medication, pain medication, she would not have known that he got an infection. So now that he has spiked a fever, they're realizing that he has an infected cyst in his gums that would never have been caught had she been giving him the fever medication. Right. So it is important to understand that you need to be able to see the symptoms in order to know when your child is ill. And if you mask the symptoms, you're hurting yourself and your child. Okay, so it's been great, and we're running out of time again. Next week, we are going to talk about the very last of using childcare. I guess we're going to make this a 3-parter.
Yay!
And then the week after that, we'll be talking about societal expectations. It's been great having you guys. Once again, happy Tuesday. Join us in a few minutes for the school age years.
See you then, kids.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this